Many jokes can be written about Solar Crown's dwindling player count, but what has plagued the game since release is the feeling of emptiness. Hong Kong is a barren, monotone wasteland. But looking at reality, you'll find an exotic subtropical island filled to the brim of people, over 1.2 million to be exact. For reference, that's the population of Birmingham, or Dallas, squeezed into this area. So today, we'll be exploring how Kylotonn could try to capture some of that life, especially since some of these things already exist in-game. So let's get started. The obvious answer people will jump to are pedestrians. However, car manufacturers have been getting increasingly harder to work with over recent times. In the last 6 years alone, there have been several public incidents of companies not wanting to be part of these games. So it might surprise you to learn that Solar Crown does have people. A lot of people. But then, why doesn't it feel like it? I'll give you 5 seconds to think about the answer. The answer is movement. No one is moving at all. Every NPC sits in their allotted group, and that's all they do. No visible walking, no audible talking, just little sections of North Korea.
Next, they took us to a computer lab where students were using the internet. And your first thought is, okay, this looks like any lab at a university back home. But then it dawns on you that it's completely silent. No one is doing anything.
I think what's funny about this situation is that if NPCs actually moved, you suddenly don't need as many NPCs to make it feel so populated, which obviously helps with the optimization. The other thing is that if they don't move, they don't need to be three-dimensional. You could use the age-old trick of 2D crowds in racing games, and if you wanted to take it even further, you could add moving blurs in building windows to give the illusion of a crowd. And to be honest, I don't think that's too unreasonable of an ask, considering they've already put the effort into things like adding a spinning texture to washing machines. Something rather minor, which I don't think most people even noticed. But the issue of movement doesn't just stop with people themselves. There's so many things in tdusc that you'd expect to move, but just don't. This is especially embarrassing when you compare it to TDU 2, which is set in more desolate and barren locations, but occasionally has a hint of life, portrayed via a moving environment. For example, TDU 2 had a moving crane in the middle of nowhere, whereas Solar Crown has this many construction sites with absolutely nothing happening at all. Even if these cranes indefinitely moved a cargo container from one stack to another, it'd be cool to cruise through the neighborhood, or even just blasting along the motorway seeing these things working. And if they wanted to take it one step further, imagine how sick it'd be if the massive container cranes in Chai 1 actually moved. Not only would it add a nice layer of randomness to racing around there, but also justified the dev's decision to change the area to look quite different to what it actually does look like in real life. I think one of the most memorable things to old TDU veterans though will be the airport. Here you could see airplanes land, taxi, and then take off again. Not to mention passively seeing airplanes in the sky as you drive around. Now, of course, most of you probably already know by now that Hong Kong Island specifically doesn't have an airport. However, what you probably don't know is that what the island lacks in airplanes, it more than makes up for it in helicopters. No, I'm not talking about that stupid quadcopter. I'm talking about the fact that just the Hong Kong-Macau ferry terminal alone, you know, the one we'll probably be taking to the casino, deals with around 54 helicopter flights every day. So I reckon it's high time Solar Crown's airspace got a bit more populated, especially when you consider that Kylotonn already has the game models for it, either from WRC or concept art. Of course, we should also mention how popular drones are nowadays in Hong Kong, something KT has annoyingly made an Ibiza race exclusive. But these are just a few examples of the many things that should move in-game. Specifically, These are things that already exist in-game. Add to that the iconic trams, the overground trains, the lorries or semi-trucks, and of course, because Hong Kong translates to fragrant harbour, how about every single type of boat as well? Especially for the country that has the world's 4th largest ship register. You know that TDU yacht you've been lusting for? Now imagine if when houses come you could see player yachts out at sea from the island itself. Now that would be a pretty cool way to elevate houses in Test Drive Unlimited. I think it's time we now move away from the theme of movement and talk about the map itself, specifically in terms of adding life to the game, not the several missing landmarks that I could drone on for hours about. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not a Hong Konger, and I've never visited the country, so while I am Asian myself, and have been fortunate enough to go to many similar-ish places, namely Singapore, Beijing, and Tokyo, this section of the video is purely based on research and assumptions from my experience. So then I'd like to start off by saying it doesn't feel like Asia at all. Driving around Hong Kong does show the team's careful attention to recreating the road structure one-to-one, but basically everything that isn't on the road itself feels really alien. At first, I couldn't quite think of why this was, but then I realized that something rather major was missing. Advertisement. Take a look at this image from the game. Now here's the same place in real life. If we ignore the fact that many of the skyscrapers are completely different, you can see that there is a huge lack of company logos and digital billboards. Everywhere you look should be an advertisement for something. Restaurants, a new phone, beauty products, construction companies, and perhaps more fittingly for TDUSC, advertisements for cars themselves. Yet another thing that TDU had that SC doesn't. However, there are some billboards in Solar Crown, but they're fairly dystopian to say the least. Every single advert in-game either comes from the Radiant company, who owns the island and are advertising visiting the island on the actual island itself, and the two rival clans having a cringe-off to see who can make the players leave the game first. Not to mention that the adverts are only found in a handful of places around the map, which, by the way, don't actually correlate to high-density places in real life. To make matters worse, instead of trying to make it look realistic, they've been excruciatingly lazy, putting multiple small digital billboards right next to each other, which not only are synced to change image at the same time, but also only have two images on them, completely neglecting the point of a digital billboard in the first place, being that you can now have video advertisements. Now obviously KT are a smaller studio, trying to make a game that punches well above what current AAA games offer, but I did literally make a better advert which actually uses in-game screenshots, unlike theirs, in maybe half an hour. But the main takeaway from this in terms of trying to add life to the game is that currently everything revolves around the Solar Crown. It's extremely dystopian, even more so than games that are actively trying to feel that way. So how do we fix this? The answer is actually quite simple. You have to imagine life as an NPC in the game world, perhaps a bit like you're playing City Skylines. I think it's safe to say that the most immersive video games tend to pay close attention to how someone might actually live in their game environment. So let's have a look at how Solar Crown has done so far. In terms of the good, Solar Crown has a decent roster of commercial shops, from real estate to pharmacies to jewelry stores. It's a bit more diverse than other racing games. Add to that a fairly large number of parks that have decent decor, and also the public transportation, or I guess as of now, the idea of public transportation. It's not too terrible at all. However, the issues start arising when you consider the needs of a normal human being. Unfortunately, almost all the buildings in the game fall under 4 categories: the blue office skyscraper, the stereotypical block of flats, a normal looking house that casually costs £7.5 million, or a licensed landmark. So for residential areas, Solar Crown has an abundance of it, but what you'll fail to find is a place of education, perhaps a place of worship. Emergency services are, of course, non-existent, and pretty much everything you'd expect a city to have, Solar Crown doesn't have it. Even for shopping centers, there's only 2, one of which being the shop's headquarters, and of course for nightclubs, there's an awesome 0 in the well-known nightclub district of Wanchai, mainly because the developers were desperate to have the 2 clans on either end of the map. Why they didn't have the thought to simply have a north-south divide, which would mean that the shops get a luxurious golf course clubhouse, is sort of beyond me. But that's a tangent we don't really have time for. Simply put, Solar Crown is desperately missing diversity on its map. This of course extends to the countryside, where large areas tend to just be replaced with an empty forest. This is especially prominent in the town near the German dealership, where it's missing about 95% of its buildings, including theme parks, narrow residential areas, and some rich people clubs, which is rather ironic given TDU's DNA. But I think the final major point into adding life to a video game is to give it some randomness. It'd be really awesome if Kylotonn were to add everything we've already talked about, but even the greatest games can feel quite empty when it's all the same. You could argue Forza Horizon 4 did it decently with its seasons, since as a player, you'd likely see the game with a fresh look every time you played it. But I think the best case study is going to be from Euro/American Truck Simulator. In these games, it's not uncommon to find some random events that add some life to the world. These might be events on the hard shoulder, like a broken down car, a car accident, or police pulling people over. But it also has some things that might inconvenience the player, such as roadwork and road closures. Add to that, the fact also includes some of the things that we actually talked about earlier, like aeroplanes flying overhead. Having some of these things in Solar Crown might not be such a bad idea. However, it's not just the roads that this randomness should be added to. To make the world truly feel alive, things need to happen that aren't always happening, if that makes sense. Imagine if, when you pass the Hong Kong stadium, you know, the one that the developers actually spent money on licensing, you could occasionally hear chants coming from within. If we're talking about within the confines of the road, then the traffic system could do with a flair of randomness. Not quite like the GTA AI trying to crash into you type, although it would be nice if, like GTA, cars would randomly park up either on roads or dedicated car parks. I think something people don't really tend to notice, but does make the traffic feel mundane in racing games, is that all of the traffic tends to travel at the same speed, which isn't really true in real life. You'll often find people going under, near, and of course over the speed limit. Not to mention if Solar Crown could add emergency vehicles, minus police cars of course, both making them on call with their lights on or just part of regular traffic. If we're talking about us going faster than regular traffic though, what about adding the clan NPCs driving around the island? After all, Hong Kong is supercar haven. It's not that uncommon to see some occasionally driving around in real life. So why is it when the Radiant Company now owns the island specifically to host a racing competition, there's suddenly nowhere to be seen? Perhaps Kylotonn was banking a bit too much on the players filling this role, but the expectation that everyone would be driving supercars all the time is also a bit funny. I reckon one of the best additions KT could add to the traffic system now is something like the older TDU games or Forza Horizon, where there are AI cars roaming around mimicking players. The best part, of course, being that you can actually instant challenge them, which if brought to Solar Crown would give the clan NPCs more justification for even existing in the game, but would also make instant challenge tasks and achievements actually doable. This has been just a few ways Kylotonn could add more life into the game. Some of these I don't think will ever happen given their resources, but others are probably quite achievable if the devs saw the true value of it. You know, other than adding another fucking Ferrari. But let me know what you think, and if you'd be kind enough to subscribe, that'd be grand. Otherwise, I hope you have a nice rest of the week, and I will see you next time. Bye!